Hello everyone, I am Crawlers and I know I'm extremely late to the party, but I decided to kind of get into Battlefield 1 campaign here. Now, I completed previous Battlefield campaigns starting with Bad Company 2, but barring that one, Battlefield campaigns have been, at least in my opinion, going more and more downhill with each installment and well, in the case of Battlefield 4 campaign, it's even gone completely into the bizarre territory. Um, Admittedly, I've been also just been watching Racevik's fantastic video on Halo 5, including most of it was, on single player campaign. And I mean, the guy's videos belong in on the National Geographic channel. They are, well, they're literally like documentaries. The amount of work and research that he puts into them is just mind-boggling. They'd make a good, I think, an hour-long series in my opinion. But um, that's beside the point. I seriously urge you to go and check out RaceFix channel. It's really, really freaking good. So, uh, Battlefield campaigns, right? Without a doubt, the the weakest part of any Battlefield game, and yet it's the one taking the longest to write, animate, and voice, and swallowing by far the lion's share of the development budget. Why are they so bad? Well, part of that I think that is that every AAA game nowadays is um, keen on fitting as many different pieces, even if they are completely unrelated, into the box, just to say that they cover more bases than the competitor. And that comes across in the missions as uh, I'm gonna show you in a second, and you can probably guess. Uh, you know, uh, that's why some people think Battlefield games should do away with a single player component altogether. Just do a multiplayer component like, I guess, World War III or Black Ops 4. But I guess that's beside the point. You could argue this, until the cows come home. Everyone, opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one. So, as you're playing this Edwards fellow in 1918 in the first mission cluster of Battlefield 1, um, who is apparently the Battlefield 1's version of Wrecker, with its, Edwards do this, Edwards do that. The protagonist has all the scripted character of a brain-dead amoeba and the likability of a blood-sucking leech. And I've noticed it's happening more and more in modern games, with perhaps the most notable exceptions of Titanfall 2 and maybe somewhat ironically Call of Duty 4. Ironically, because Infinity Ward's original talent, that gave us the amazing campaign in Call of Duty 4, later founded Respawn, which, in my opinion, is just the best name they could ever come up with under the circumstances. It's like a giant middle finger to Activision, which is even funnier if you consider that these people started off from the Medal of Honor team back at EA before founding Infinity Ward and going, on the dark, crossing over on the dark side with Activision. But I digress. So, um, what occurred to me as I was playing this mission, tell me if they can spot this too, is that later modern campaigns, single player campaigns, are basically written into the game as a way to check off as many boxes as the publisher can to appeal to as wide an audience as they can before shoving down our throats as, you know, down the throats of a Christmas going, Christmas shopping public, I guess, of grandparents that are basically buying something to shut their kid up for a few hours so they can just, eat in peace at the adults' table or watch the game on TV in peace without actually knowing the first thing about um, anything digital involving the C word. word, uh, by which I mean controllers, of course. What the hell did you think I meant? I mean, there's a lot of things that I think are wrong with the campaign, and it's been said, 100 times before. Protagonists you can't get attached to, as I said, making caring for the narrative impossible. Wrecker, Edwards is basically as groundbreaking as starting off a movie trailer with "in a world." And speaking of the narrative, the story um, that is told to you through a dry reading of the script, not shown or somehow explained to you on screen, is, well, just rattled off. Basically, is the least enticing way of doing it outside of having it tattooed on your naked ass. And as I said about the publishers trying to cram features into the campaign, it comes out as an unbelievably bad, mishmashed collection of contradicting objectives and lack of a narrative or any kind of a story. For example, this struck me in the mission that I first started playing with Edwards. The the objective was to go in front of the tank and scout ahead. I guess that would make sense if the fucking tank didn't stay glued to the side of you like a overprotective mother in the front seat while her kid is driving to her skank girlfriend's house. And but as soon as you have to go off ahead and supposedly clear the way for the tank by killing enemies on foot, Christ only knows why, because it's, a tank, you have to constantly run back to the tank to repair it because the dumb as opposed AI is getting pummeled, and you're basically babysitting this NPC, right? That has less HP than you do. Never mind that it's made of metal and weighs 30 tons, and also gets stuck in really hilarious situations. So, what I thought while playing this part was that uh, besides a fork, that would feel also nicely inserted slowly into my retinas right about now, they're just they're just overwhelming you with tasks instead of keeping it simple. Like overwhelming you with left clicks instead of any kind of a meaningful narrative of any kind. Like uh, just one task. That's it. In my opinion, in my very limited, obviously, gaming experience that I've had so far, by far, by a mile, the best single-player campaign mission was all gilded up from Call of Duty 4. That was a masterpiece of writing, voice acting, plot, suspense, stealth. It had everything. You weren't, sent to fly a helicopter, then demo a bridge, then Paul Revere a horse through town, then fly a jet through Red Bull rings, then win a Tetris championship in a nearby pub, all in the same mission. No, there was only one goal. Remain stealthy, then shoot a bad guy at the end. That's it. The characters made a very compelling story. Uh, you could, you could not only believe, but that would keep you on the edge of your seat for the entire mission. You were there. You knew the protagonist. You knew, not because Macmillan kept yelling at you, Wrecker, fly under those power lines. Now, wear a tutu and jump on one foot while, patting your head with the other hand. If that mission was written today, I bet the entire game's synopsis would have been dryly read off by Macmillan, in monotone of a piece of paper in the first minutes of the campaign. You know that basically while the game wouldn't let you move off the spawn point, forcing you to listen to the 10 pages of regurgitated sputum that is every FPS single player's campaign nowadays. And ironically, the only new and novel part of the perhaps any novelty of factor in Battlefield 1, the horse, at the end of the mission, the single player mission, I should say. I'm only talking about single player right now. Uh, uh, you know, of that mission was basically cut down to around 30 seconds, being nothing more than a boring dressage, from point A to point B. But, oh, by the way, dressage is a sport with horses. Look it up. It's even an Olympic event. You uncultured swine. I mean, the Peyote-esque inspired pigeon flight, that was probably the highlight of this campaign. I mean, it lasted for only, like, 30 seconds or something like that, and it didn't even include, press left mouse button to take a shit on some enemy tank or something like that, or to mark an enemy position. That would have been a lot more fun if you could maybe do loop-de-loops, or barrel rolls or whatever. But everything else in this mission pack was, as Peter Griffin would put it, shallow and pedantic. Another thing that is necessary in single player is enemy controlled by computer, since, well, it's single player. But if said AI is so ridiculously bad, it would be shameful to show up as the thought process of a rock in Asteroids in 1978. Basically, unless the enemy is shot in the face, he wouldn't even know you're there. You could basically shoot a fly off his shoulder with a silenced rifle, and he'd just go on talking to his body about Wiener Schnitzel night down at the ye old bosom pukin'. By the way, his body, who also seems to be programmed even dumber than he is. I cannot stress this enough. AI is so incredibly dumb, the enemies not only don't hear you when you're right next to them, as I said, when you shoot them in the face, but the bloody AI tanks actually get stuck on the same debris that, you know, a normal player controlled tank would. So, I mean, this is next level irony right here. Way to go, DICE. Way to keep up with the realism. And I mean, something that is was touted before releasing Battlefield 1 was realism. Ooh, the arcadey cookie cutter FPS game will be so realistic, all the while shooting aliens with a machine laser pistol. But of course, there was no getting away from the dumbass 2018 style HUD on top of supposedly 1918 style enemies and technologies. Way to stick to your guns, DICE. Completely ruining the immersion, if there was any by now. And speaking of immersion, Edwards apparently was implanted with cybernetic eyes and is able to see enemies in real time through walls. The one thing I seriously liked in Call of Duty 4 was the dialogue and voice acting. I mean, these were characters that had character, for lack of a better word. Sorry, I lost my thesaurus. So, they cursed like people, they had arguments between themselves, chewed each other out, poked fun at each other, and were, generally quite unique from each other. Battlefield 1, though, seems to have gone the other way. Um, Here the dialogue is so flat you could call it a New York style pizza. No, that's still too thick. Dialogue as thin as this country's commitment to its allies. Yeah, that'll do. Here you have Edwards, who is trying to kickstart the tank by physically, cranking the engine, supposedly after being shot at in a dark village half the night. He isn't even winded, and he doesn't curse at all. Making things worse after the tank does come alive and everyone cheers so flatly they could just be, adding items on their Alexa to their grocery list. Another character tells Edwards that Old Bess, a stereotypical name of a woman, of course, for the tank, apparently likes it when he curses. I mean, this just struck me as worse than, those people that hang the toilet paper the wrong way. The way that I'm talking about, right? underhanded, not overhanded. That's just, I mean, those people are worse than Hitler. And, well, I'd say another thing Battlefield games seem to always struggle with is explaining to the player the mechanics and gameplay elements and how to do stuff. I know. How difficult does a left click simulator have to be before you start showing game tips? Well, not very, but the game does a piss poor job of explaining the ones, the techniques that are there in the first place. And worse, you actually have to die on the first, go around for in order for the damn tips to appear. I mean, what the fuck is that? At this point, the campaign becomes a chore that you have to, pass through in order to put a check mark at, much like, the haphazardly cobbled together features of the missions that have nothing to do with each other, that, are there just to add multiple features to the gameplay. I mean, it's like a Frostbite engine tech demo, not a campaign mission. Yeah, that's what this is, I think. It's a very loose collection of unrelated features cobbled together to show off the game's possibilities. I should say the game's engine's possibilities. And another thing that games all too often today use to get away with, trying to downsize their install space or just save on assets or time or animation or what have you, is they'll reuse some of the same assets or maybe even things as big as maps, between missions where they'll just basically, be replaying the same map from two different perspectives. Like, for example, this one is where you play the same village at night, on foot, and then in daytime in the tank, or you have the same assets appearing in Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, like those, trailers with the stairs on the side and shit like that, or most of the, well, some of the models, I guess, some other models, and but FPS games, I guess, are not even uh, limited to reusing stuff. I mean, look at some racing games; they'll just pad their car lists by inserting what they'll tell you is a different, an entirely different car, when basically it's essentially the same car. It just might have a slightly modified hood on it, or just something as silly as a different livery. And what you end up is thinking, oh well, there's 55 cars instead of 40, so there must be a lot more cars here. I mean, this just feels like it's lazy, writing. It just, feels like it's lazy programming, this reusing assets. I mean, look, it's why I felt like Hardline, um, why I couldn't really bring myself to like it that much, because look, and it's a shame too, because it's a cool idea, but most of the assets in that game, you know, everything like the gun models, the ideal, the mechanics, everything was basically, the gun list, was more or less the same as in Battlefield, 4 or 3 even. So you didn't really feel like you were playing something else, something you were um, paying $60 for, and that's just the base game. So, I leave this up to you to think whether it's lazy or not to reuse assets, but, I would have just liked to not replay the same damn map a couple times in a row, is what I'm saying. I actually regret losing the recording of this campaign on the first go around, and having to replay this burning dumpster fire. I mean, uh, I didn't actually lose the recording. I still have it somewhere, but it was corrupted in some underhanded way to the point where Vegas crashed every time I tried to render it, and I just went nuts for days trying to render this thing, and at which point I just said fuck it and re-recorded the entire campaign. But um, one thing that was kind of fun that happened on the first go around was that I killed this flamethrowing sentry guy, the elite class dude, in the dark of the village by putting a couple of those bouncing berries, mine things in the doorway and kind of luring him through it. That was so much fun. I was so proud of myself, as I'm sure you are too. So thanks for watching. Please rate and share this video as it helps my channel grow. And remember, in Soviet Russia, YouTube subscribes you.